And welcome to another episode of G220 Radio. This is Ricky Gantz. That's Mike Miller. We want to thank you for tuning into the program here tonight. Tonight, we've got a good program. I believe we're going to be talking about Proverbs chapter 31, verses 10 through 20, and continuing in this Proverbs series. Just about to wrap it up. We'll have one more show after this, but we will be completing the book of Proverbs, which is such a great feat here for us on G220 Radio. So, Mike, how you doing? How's things going? You excited about wrapping up this series? And tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with the catechisms as well, because we do have a playlist over there on the G220 Radio. Kind of put that together, the playlist of going through the Baptist Catechism. Mike, talk to us about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we started this, we figured out like 7 years ago, something like that. Maybe
It's been a while. Yep.
I remember why we started it. I think it was the first time you went to Cosmosdale and you heard my pastor preach. And you're like, you know what? I want to do a series. I was like, we should. He's only up like chapter 15. So we're like far and away ahead of him. Granted, he kind of sprinkles it in here and there between different other books and sermon series. So, that's that. So,
and here I thought we were doing pretty slow here, going 6 years, and
it's been a while since he's done. I think the last stint he did like chapters 13, 14, 15, something like that, or maybe it was 12, 13, 14. Mm-hmm. It was, like I said, he does it. My pastor does preach exegetical, but he will sometimes use Proverbs to delay a book, because whatever book he's preaching in, he'll figure out what text he needs for like Easter or for Christmas, and then try to match his preaching outline to line up all of those dates. So I feel like sometimes he uses Proverbs to try to push a book here and there. And just shout out, my pastor's been doing the book of Joshua. So it's been really good. And he's been systematically working through the Old Testament in this way. So he started in Genesis many, many moons ago. And he's gone through all of Exodus, Leviticus. We had him on during that time to talk about Leviticus and also Deuteronomy. So check that out. And then kind of when Ricky's like, hey, I can't be on tonight, like next week, like last week was, we're doing the Proverbs. We're not doing Proverbs. We're doing the Baptist Catechism. My wife and I have taught the Baptist Catechism for many years. Gone through it a couple different times. And obviously I have the tagline, Stay Baptist. My wife will tell you I get upset when Baptists quote the Westminster when the Baptist Catechism has the same question and answer. Like if you're doing like baptism to talk about Presbyterians, or, how do we chiefly glorify God? Or what is the chief end of man? Question 1. It's the Baptist started with God. But it's that way. But just kind of in a series, we did the 1689. The Baptist Catechism is kind of the teaching tool that comes out of the 1689. And so I think it's always good to go through and to think about what the catechism has to say, because it helps us to think of theology succinctly, to have ideas and definitions that we can later expound upon as we grow and to see and how they fit together. I've always enjoyed the reason for the catechisms. It's not just a Catholic thing, as some people will say. The Reformed Church has always had catechisms also. And it's just a good way to think about theology, to have something short and concrete and full of just meaty goodness for it. And some of it is I can kind of prepare somewhat quickly in case I need to make up a show.
Yeah, it's been very helpful for a couple things. Obviously, to if I'm unable to be here and we have to kind of switch gears and go in another direction, to have that as a backup show for you to kind of go through. But it's also, like you said, it's very helpful for those to look at what the catechism is teaching. And catechism is not a bad word. Often I've met many Baptists who, when you talk about catechisms, they think Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
But it's not solely, doesn't belong to Rome, right? It's just teaching. It's catechizing your children to teach them, to instruct them, which the Bible tells us to do, to instruct our children, and instructing ourselves, instructing, grown-up believers, so that we can learn what the Bible says and what the Bible teaches. And it's so important. I think I saw you wanted to jump in and say something.
Yeah, I think too. It's systematic theology, bite size. It's telling us, we think about what the Bible as a whole, when we to know it and study it and be part of it. The confession narrows it down and says, this is what we believe the Bible talks about. This is what we believe is described. And the catechism isn't a tool to kind of help you to do it. It's very much a very small bite size systematic theology. So it's not complete. You need to grow. You have to move on from it. But at the same time, for new Christians, for helping training kids, it's a very good tool to help start to think about the things of God. And I've used this a lot in my own family with the Boys and Girls Catechism, gives us answers that they've memorized and can point them back to when they have questions. And so, when we talk about God, and sometimes my son would equate that God is Jesus and Jesus is God, and kind of reduce the Trinity just to the second person. And we come back, well, no, God has three persons, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so it helps to bridge some of that language barrier and help them to go back to things that you are teaching them in the same way that you have taught them. You don't have to come up with new language or figure out a different way to do it.
Yeah. So it's very helpful. And again, you can go to the G220 Radio YouTube channel.
So yeah, there's a playlist there that you can get all the episodes. And then next week, Lord willing, we'll be talking about the work of creation. And I know we've done shows on creation, but we'll kind of focus on what the catechism has to say about it.
Yeah. So go do that. Make sure you subscribe over there to the channel. Follow that playlist, as well as there's many other playlists for you to check out. We would love for you to go and subscribe there and follow us there on YouTube. Another news item here for those that may be tuning in may already be aware, but John MacArthur passed the other day on into glory. John MacArthur had a pretty big influence on my early years as a Christian. I grew up in a church, false convert. When I came to faith at 32, I listened to as much teaching as I could get off of Moody Radio. And one night I came across John MacArthur on a Wednesday evening, and I had not heard any of the other individuals that I had been listening to on the radio preach like MacArthur. There was an authority there that was unlike anyone else that I'd heard preach. And I went to his website, and I had been paying for sermons from Chip Ingram back in the day. And I was buying sermon series, and then I would put them on my MP3 player, and I'd listen through the series. It was 99 cents a series. So if it was a 6-part series, that's $6. If it was, 12, that was $12. But then I found Grace to You when I found John MacArthur, and I just saw that all of his sermons were listed there for free. And at that point, I ended up getting an iTunes player. I think they were called iPods back in the day. Yeah. Now it's all on your phone. But and I learned how to double speed. So I was able to go through everything that MacArthur had on his website there that he was offering for free. And I benefited greatly from listening to his teachings. I became more Reformed Baptist in my thinking, and so there were some obviously, if you're Reformed Baptist 1689 guy, there's some difference between dispensationalism, covenant kind of thinking, but I still respected and was grateful for the influence that MacArthur had in my early years there. Hadn't listened to him as much as the years had gone on. Every once in a while, if somebody recommended something, I'd go back and listen, or I'd see people posting clips of certain things, and I may see it in that aspect, but was truly thankful for his ministry. And I know he reached a lot of people, and he stood for a lot of truth in many of his books and things, responding to errors out there. I remember one more quick story, Mike, and then I'll toss it over to you, is he did this series on charismatic chaos. He's got a book. I've got the book actually, but I made a CD for this lady who was in Pentecostal thinking, charismatic thinking. I gave it to this lady, the CD of his teaching for her to listen to. She broke it in half. I never got it back. He made her so mad because she was so staunch in her charismatic thinking and teaching that she was mad. And I never got it back. I was kind of disappointed, but so be it.
Yeah. I got to listen to MacArthur a couple different times live, which is always a treat to hear any preacher live. I knew of him. His ministry was not as impactful in my life as others. Obviously, well respected him. Knew him as, I think one of my former elders said, he's the greatest preacher alive during this time frame. His ministry was very, I'm going to preach the Bible. And I think as Christians, we should find pastors who are willing to do that, just to preach the word. And to find a church like that is a great thing. One time I was supposed to hear him live. It was in chapel at Southern Seminary. He was supposed to start a conference. I was going to start in chapel service on a Tuesday. I think it was a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday conference. And so obviously everyone is coming to hear him preach. Alumni chapel at Southern Seminary was full, thousands of people there. Dr. Mueller comes up and informs everyone. I should say this too. It's so full that I'm in the chapel orchestra and I have to stay in my seat the entire service. So I'm like 5 feet from the pulpit on the ground. So MacArthur would have been like 6, 7, 8 feet like above me. It was kind of awkward. I had a similar thing with John Piper. It was very strange. So Dr. Mueller comes up to the pulpit and announces that John MacArthur, his flight from New York got canceled because of a hurricane, and that had kind of went back in the sea and hit New York. The audible disappointment in Alumni Chapel was deafening. We had Alistair Begg as his replacement. So part of me is like, what's wrong here? It's a story I'll never forget. I kind of, at the time, jaded me a little bit. I was like, we get so much good preaching here. How much is it just maybe an over importance of a man? But every sermon I've heard from MacArthur, I've read some of his books and have been blessed with them on top of the times I've been able to hear him live at a conference.
Yeah. I think one of the things we got to remember is as Christians, we never idolize a man or idolize an individual or the celebrity pastor kind of culture that can happen sometimes unintentionally. But we do give honor to those who deserve honor. And I think his life and his ministry has been a testament of someone who's been faithful to preach what he believes the scripture is saying. Again, we have some differences being reformed and dispensational, but yet he still preaches his convictions and stood upon them and stood against some errors over the years and stood tall against them. And so we can thank God for men like John MacArthur who are now in the presence of the Lord. And so we are thankful for his ministry. Now, that being said, we want to jump here into this chapter of Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman, a portrait of godly strength. This is going to be part one, because again, we're going to split this up. The last 20, no, not more than 20, I think 21 verses, split it up into two shows. But we're going to go ahead and jump into this. I do have a bit of a sore throat, so bear with me. But as we was getting into this, and we talked about it from the first 9 verses, King Lemuel, and these were the words of the king, and we kind of went through that a couple weeks back, and now getting into this, the woman that fears the Lord is where we're jumping into this Proverbs 31. How often have you heard that, Mike? People talk about, oh, I need a Proverbs 31 woman, or be a Proverbs 31 woman, right? Well, we're going to look at Proverbs 31 and see what it says here. Go ahead,
I wonder
Mike.
if there's a ministry that's called Proverbs 31.
I think so.
Okay.
I do believe there is. I'm sure.
Yeah,
And if not, there will be, I'm
Oh,
sure,
no.
at some point, but there is.
Yeah.
All right. So Proverbs 31, verse 10, it says, an excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. And I think the verse is self-explanatory, but when you think about it, this is a woman of strength, of character, and godly virtue. It's rare and it's valuable. She's not common and not easily found. This is why, again, why people say, I need a Proverbs 31 woman, because you want to have an excellent wife who can find one, right? And ultimately, for there to be this excellent wife, the most important thing is she a godly woman? Does she seek to honor the Lord? Does she seek to glorify God in all that she does? Because if that is her priority, right, above everything else, to please God, she's going to be submissive to her husband in a godly way of submission, as we talked about that on previous shows. She's going to seek to raise her children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, raising them to know him. And so it is so important for especially young men who are seeking a wife to look for a godly woman, because an excellent wife, who can find a woman like this?
Yeah. Did you read John Gill on his interpretation of this verse?
Yeah, that was a breakdown from Gil.
So, at least what I was reading from Gil, he was like, this isn't talking about women from Adam. And kind of exclusively interprets it as referring to the church, this excellent wife that is made holy by Christ. And I think there's elements in which I think Gil picks up on ideas and thoughts that obviously are true. Like, I don't want to say this is it, but I don't think we need to exclusively say that. I think it can be both and.
Mm-hmm.
That, because he kind of makes the argument that there is no kind of like excellent, and is this idea of moral, of being upright and standing, and so a daughter of Adam can't be that because of sin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, like in the true perfect sense, he's right in that idea, which makes, the interpretation of the church being the proper wife here, because the church is made holy and perfect and pure by Christ. I think there's an element to think about that, but I think we can also hold that this idea of an excellent or moral wife, as you mentioned, one who fears the Lord, goes on to show us that we should be intentional about our spouses. Now, we're both married. My wife would probably attest that that I probably couldn't find a good wife unless God had her like hit me or something like that. Like my finding skills are not the greatest. But to think about, as, and I think not even just, I mean, this applies to women, but even for a second, when we think about men and doing it, is it like, are we ones who are pursuing godliness and going after? And this is what Solomon, or there's debates on who actually wrote this, but the language leads to is that as a man, as you think about your duty to leave your mother and your father and to cleave to your wife, you need to consider who you want to cleave to. And verse 10 introduces then verses 10, 11, and 12 really introduce, okay, what does this excellent, moral, upstanding woman looks like? Because similar to wisdom in chapter 3, who was compared to jewels, this excellent woman is compared and exceeds the value of jewels. So like wisdom, you should go after her. You should take care of her and
Right.
see her value and worth. And this plays into, I mean, this is not the issue we're going to, but when you think about how wives are to submit to their husbands, the flip play is the husband should act a certain way towards his wife. And I think when we see that finding an excellent wife is difficult, is hard. So when we find it, we need to treat her the way that she is more precious than jewels.
Yeah, indeed. And yes, definitely with Gil, he will definitely pull out a lot of the, I don't want to say allegory, or pull the imagery.
Allegory.
Yeah, pull the imagery of the church, or pull the imagery into the New Testament. And I think often, if you think about a reformed way of reading scripture and looking back in history, spiritualizing or going into a spiritual aspect of the scripture is not something that is foreign, but we want to be careful with it, because obviously you can go too far with certain things. But I don't think it's far-fetched to look at this. I do believe that we're talking about, this woman. You're going to find this woman, as King Lemuel is saying, like this mother's words telling him, these things. And again, that debate about whether is King Lemuel is he Solomon, is it someone else, and whatnot. But it's giving this instruction, even in the beginning, hear me, listen to my words. And now this mother saying, listen to what I have to tell you about this instruction, and getting into the type of woman you want to find, the type of woman you want to be with. And again, that spiritualizing or getting into this understanding of, yes, the church, Christ seeks after the church. Christ beautifies the church. He makes her a bride fit for him, right? And an unbelieving woman, now unbelievers can have a good marriage. They can get married, have a good marriage, have a good family life and whatnot. But the ultimate reality is genuine love, genuine submission, genuine desire to please the husband comes at loving God above all things, right? And then men obviously shouldn't abuse that, as we've talked about, you just mentioned. And we did in our family series. Anybody want to go back and listen to that? We talked about marriage. We talked about the role of the wife, the role of the husband. And it's vital. God says that husbands are to love their wife as Christ loved the church, even willing to give their lives for her. And so the man has a responsibility. The husband has a responsibility. But thinking about this woman, she's this excellent wife. Who can find her? As you said, she's far more precious than jewels. Having a spouse who loves the Lord, not perfect. Nobody's perfect. No Christian is perfect. No man, husband, no wife perfect. But having a wife who desires to glorify God above all things, right? And is seeking to put those characteristics into practice, makes for such a good strengthened union between a husband and wife, especially if the husband's trying to do the same thing. You're trying to honor God above everything else. You're going to have a deeper friendship, a deeper love. It's going to be shown in the way that you're trying to seek and raise your children. Just vitally, vitally important. Verse 11 says, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack or gain. So again, she's a trustworthy person, so much so that the husband's not worried about her. He trusts her, right? Trust that she's going to be faithful to him. Trust that she's going to be honest with him. Trust that she's going to be a good steward of what he is bringing into the home, right? He trusts her to do right, and he will have no lack. So because he can trust her, it brings security and confidence to the marriage. If I'm going out and I'm working and I'm bringing home a paycheck to provide, and I'm trusting her to go and spend and buying the groceries and making sure certain things that we need are there, I don't have to come home and worry about the household being a mess, being awry, being our finances all out of control, because I'm trusting, right? And that's this idea here of this woman who's this Proverbs 31 type woman who's an excellent wife. The husband can trust her.
Yeah. And I think, as you mentioned, there's other scriptures that talk about only trust in the Lord, don't trust in like chariots. You think of Psalm for that. But I think here, and what some of the commentaries I was reading look at, is that it's a trust that is rooted in trusting the Lord, that the Lord has brought this marriage together, and to bring love, to bring joy. And so the husband, in trusting the Lord, can trust that the wife will be trustworthy. She's going to be reliable in her deeds. And there's blessing that comes with it. I think you might have misread it. I have it as no lack of gain. So this idea is that his trust in her leads to I think, not only a financial gain, but a spiritual gain. There's a growth in flourishing. We've talked about this idea throughout Proverbs that we are physical but spiritual beings, and there's an element in which the spiritual and the physical work off of each other. And the trusting heart of the husband with the wife provides this kind of flourishing, that there is this gain in wealth and spirituality, and a connectedness that in some sense that gives us a small taste of what heaven should be like in this relationship. So I think there's that importance of that trust and growing together, and this and everything that is provided with the wife as she cultivates the home to visualize the theology of God, and how she acts with the children's and what she does, and making things in some sense more beautiful than what it was.
Yeah. I don't know what I said. I thought I said that. I was reading from the.
You said orgain. So
did I?
Okay.
Just, yeah.
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 That made it. You
well,
no lack or gain. Like you just.
No lack of gain.
Yeah.
All right, verse 12, it says, she does him good and not harm all the days of her life. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's just a continuation of, describing this excellent woman. It's kind of introductory, getting into verse 13, but she, in some sense, I think you can say, like, with this love, she embodies 1 Corinthians 15.
Yeah.
She is serving her husband and her family. I mean, specifically her husband here, in a way that, again, promotes a flourishing. It does him good. She's looking after him. And, you know, that seems one-sided, but the husband has other things. He's to love his wife as Christ loves church. He's supposed to love sacrificially also. So with Ephesians and here in Proverbs 31, we see that both the husband and the wife are to live sacrificially to each other. And so here the focus is on the wife and that she does good. She's living in a way that brings flourishing in the home. We've talked about in other places in Proverbs about how it's better to be, on the corner of a roof in the desert than with a nagging wife. And the idea of how that has. But here the Proverbs 31 woman is contrary to that. She is the one who does good. He is there in that loving relationship, and she does it all the days of her life. That's the tenor. Is it perfect, as we mentioned on time? No, but in her life, I mean, you think about, I have images of marriages I know from church who've been married for a long time. And to think about the love and devotion these couples have now that they have like great grandchildren. They're not just, grandparents, they're great grandparents. And to think about how the wife serves her husband and is good to him all the days. And that is, working out kind of that love that we're called to have for one another.
Yeah. Yeah. As you said there, in 1 Corinthians 13, this idea, this woman here is one who is seeking the welfare of her husband, and spiritually and physically, like in a both maternally kind of way and a spiritual kind of way. But in Corinthians 13, it says, love is patient, is kind. It does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. Which means it's not selfish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this works both ways. Men should be desiring to be loving like this as well. Yeah. But in speaking specifically of a wife, it's not what makes a good marriage and a good relationship is not what I can get out of you then will in turn cause me to respond with this type of love. Mm-hmm. If your desire is to please the Lord, then it shouldn't be about selfishness or what I get out of this to get. I'll give to get, or I'll get because I give because I get, vice versa. It's no, I desire to please God. So therefore, the love that I have, it is patient. I'm not going to be quick to be unkind or hot-tempered. I'm going to be patient with my spouse, right? I'm going to not envy or boast I'm not going to be arrogant in this relationship. I'm not going to insist on my own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing. So again, this idea of what is wrong. A good spouse is going to tell their husband or wife, hey, I think you were wrong here. I don't see how this is pleasing to the Lord. What you did here, or how you discipline the children, or how you did this with the finances, or I don't think this is a good thing. And again, if you're embodying this type of love, this type of person, this type of characteristic, your response is not going to be, who are you to tell me how I did this wrong? It's okay, because I'm not insisting on what is wrong. I'm looking to be pleasing to the Lord first and foremost above all things. And if the spouse loves me, then that spouse is coming to me because they care for me spiritually and physically, so that even emotionally and however you want to embody that, right? They're caring for you. And so they're seeking your good above other things, not for their own benefit, but they're seeking your good in your walk with the Lord. All right, verse 13. Verse 13 says, "She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands." So this is an industrious kind of woman, a productive woman, not a lazy woman, is
Mm-hmm.
what this verse is speaking of.
Yeah, you see it. And one of the commentaries I was reading notices how um here in verses 13 through 18, there's some parallels that go along, but there is this kind of this idea of doing, as you mentioned. She seeks. She's going after. She's not um waiting around. She's going after it. We may modernly say she's an entrepreneur. She's a go-getter. And I think you see this, and you mentioned, she's not lazy, but also I think this um Proverbs 31 woman isn't when she's industrious, when she's working, she's seeking the wool, the flax, she's making it into clothes or whatever she's using to making it. She can't be bothered by the busybodiness that Paul talks about in First Timothy, and and getting into like other people's business. She's has a task, and she's doing something for her family. I mean, it's in verse 14. I think these 13 and 14 go together. Um, she's like a ship of the merchant and brings her food from afar. You get this idea of like she's industrialist enough that she's not only taking care of her, if she's making clothes or whatever for her family, she's productive enough to, like a merchant ship, go to someplace else and sell her stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like a merchant ship would, bring this kind of foreign, it talks about brings her food from afar. Like you get this, this idea that she's bringing foreign delicacies over with her. And the commentators like, this could be just like the next town over, like, in getting stuff that they need. But this is the sense of what she's like. She is doing these things. She is productive. She's not lazy. She's taking care of her family. And again, kind of showing that that the husband will not lack gain, that she's in what she is doing. She's also helping raise money and take care of the family, and allowing him to kind of do his own work, whatever that might have been at the time.
Yeah. One of the many things that I love about my wife is that, we are not rich people. We don't have lots of money. We make do with what the Lord provides for us through my working. And we like to go to thrift stores, and my wife will find things at a very inexpensive price, clothing for the kids, or items in the household, things that we can, bookshelves, or other items that we may need. But also she'll find things that we can resell. And there are so many times when we were short on finances where we thought, okay, how are we going to get this paid? Or how are we going to provide for this? Especially, how one thing happens after another. One vehicle goes down and then another vehicle goes down. And you're like, how are we going to pay for that? And because of some of the things that she's found that were inexpensive to buy at the thrift store, or at if we're out thrifting or garage sale or whatever it may be, and then be able to resell for a good value, that has been so valuable to us as a family, because it always seems to that the Lord would provide at the right time something that she picked up. Hey, it's just enough money to cover getting this tire for the car or getting this fixed. And it's been a way. And so I say that to say it's one of the many things I love about my wife, but in this aspect of looking to find ways to benefit us, because she doesn't work outside of the home, but she works. She's not lazy. Like, there's a lot of work. Had a guy one time at work, he asked me what my wife does, and I said, well, she's at home with our kids. She homeschools and takes care of the home. He was like, oh, she's got it easy. I'm like, no, she works hard. She's a hardworking woman. It's not being at home with your children and homeschooling, and it's not like you're just sitting on your you're behind all day. No, it's
Yeah.
constant. She's constantly working. The kids always need something. If I'm sick, I'm worse than the kids. I always need something. Give me this to eat. I'm hungry. I'm feeling sick. Whatever. But she always lovingly seeks to be a servant's heart in it. And so, all right, where are we at? Verse 15.
Yeah.
Verse 15, I believe. All right, so verse 15 says, she rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think it just kind of piggybacks. This verse really indicates what you just said about your wife. She gets up early. It's still dark out. I think some of the language here indicates kind of like she's getting ready to go, like a lioness, to go prey, go get some prey. She rises while everything is still dark. It's night. There's kids are sleeping, and provides food for her household. She's going out and she's making sure the food that they have what they need for the day to be able to provide. But not only that, commentators note, like, and obviously this is not as true as this, but this woman here, as being described, seems to be someone of wealth. They have maidens. She has servants that she also takes care of. And I didn't pick this up right away, but one of the commentaries I was reading did was, I mean, we see this with Sarah and Abraham. Sarah's not lazy. When the angel of the Lord comes to Abraham, Sarah's in the tent making food.
Mm-hmm.
She's working also. This comes up even a little bit later in verse 17 and in verse 19, but she's doing something. She's preparing. She is along with her maidens, working out. So I think this isn't like you mentioned, my wife's sitting at home, she might have some friends over and they're just kind of giggling and doing, whatever reality show we want to paint in which we see that happens, but that she's working for the family. She's making sure the household has food, that everyone is fed, and not just hers. Like, she's looking after her servants. She's serving her servants so that they can maybe serve her in the various ways. And I think it really encapsulates this kind of servant-hearted woman that God calls all of us to be, in one sense, but then is exemplified in this godly wife.
Yeah. All right, verse 16. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. So again, this is, I think, contrasting or speaking of someone who is this woman, this Proverbs 31 woman, speaking of this wife. She's someone who's wise and thoughtful in her decisions. She's not rash. So she considers a field. She's thinking about it. She considers it, and then she buys it with the fruit of her hands, and she plants a vineyard. So she buys it, but then utilizes it. Go ahead.
And I think, too, kind of just what I mentioned, she's willing to work. It's not just servants or maids. She's out there. I mean, it says it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants the vineyard. She's the one doing the planting. She's the one who not oversees everything. I think it's just the counter. And I don't know where to place, so I think I'll do it here. I think this is why MLMs are so popular within Christian spheres, especially stay-at-home moms. This idea that you can work from home, you can work your own hours and do all these things. Now, we have a show on it. You should go listen to it and see how it kind of preys on women in this way, oftentimes, in which leads them further off than it does help them, but is not always the case. But to think about like the woman is not just sitting around all day doing nothing. She's working. She's providing. She's helping. And to be able to do that, and I think those are the principles we see, whether, you know, at times maybe, you know, that requires work outside the home. We're not an agricultural economy anymore, so we can kind of maybe play with this a little bit on exactly what this does. But she is trying to help the family, and she's not just idly, as we mentioned times the same way. She's actually getting involved in the work.
Yeah. All right. Verse 16 says she consider. No, I already read that one. Verse 17.
Mm-hmm.
She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. So now you can think of this in a physical aspect. She's working out, making him strong arms. That could be the case, physically strong, but also spiritually and emotionally. She's ready to take on the tasks of the day. She's getting herself prepared, preparing herself for whatever may come her way during the day.
Yeah. The Hebrew here is girdle. She girdles up her loins. So yeah, she's dressing her strength. She's being able to getting herself ready to do the task at hand.
Yeah.
She's able to do what needs to be done. She's not like the lazy glutton who sits on the thing and doesn't want to do it because he thinks there's a lion outside. She's doing what God has called her to do on that day.
Verse 18 says, she perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. So again, she's recognizing the value of her work, and she's remaining active throughout the day.
Yeah. And I think too, part of it is like the versions, the 10 versions and the Olivet Discourse. I think we can say like her lamp doesn't go out at night, is that she's again considering and thoughtful, that she is planning. She knows what she needs, and she has what she needs. She's not rash or just kind of flying by the seat of her pants. All it is that she's thoughtful and considerate. She's wise in how she acts and interacts, and that includes like her lamps have the oil they need so they don't go out at night. Like she's not forgetting and missing.
Mm-hmm. All right, verse 19, it says she puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle. So she puts her hands to the distaff, her hands hold the spindle. Again, she's continues this imagery of industry, working, being industrious, working to make clothes or goods by her hands, which is not something that I think in our today's society a lot of women do, but there are still those who are by their hands making clothing and but long ago this was obviously something that happened more frequently. Today we just go to the store and we buy things, but the idea is still this woman is again being industrious. She's being a worker. She's not a lazy woman. She's being one that's seeking to constantly stay busy doing things that are productive, not just busy to be busy, but productive in her busyness.
Yeah. And there's with that in verse 20, it repeats kind of that idea. So in verse 19, she puts her hands out on the distaff. It's a spindle, double spindle, something you would have to reach for. Keyword there, reach. She puts her hand to hold the spindle. The language is kind of indicating more palms, like putting in palms. But then what does she do? She opens her hands to the poor. She reaches out her hands to the needy. So not only is she productive in what she does, she recognizes needs and takes care of it. So you think about they have to make their own clothes with the spindle, but she sees that there's someone poor and maybe they can't afford for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason may be. She is opening her palm to the poor, helping them. You think about how the law allowed for, or the law told the Israelites not to clean the entire field so that the poor can work and have food. They weren't to take it out. I think you see this woman who loves the Lord and is excellent have an awareness around her to see people in need and to be able to meet those needs when she can. She opens her palms to the poor. She reaches her hands out to the needy. She's going out there. I think that's I think I know I mean I need this as much as um anyone, but how sometimes we may be jaded because of kind of how we think about poor people in America and wrestle with like how do I help them without enabling their sin or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we think about these questions. But I think you know women kind of God has gifted them to have that compassion to help
Mm-hmm.
and to be willing. And I think in this this woman, this moral wisdom who loves the Lord, recognizes and sees the needs and then is willing to help. And I think that in my case helps me to be more aware and see needs and try to help, even though I'm far from perfect in that.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were saying there, that with this last verse here, verse 20, true godliness, it includes mercy, right?
Mhm.
And so this woman is reflecting Christ's heart in her care for other people. And it's not always easy, again, to do that in our society because, as you mentioned, there are some people, because of their sin, are in certain situations. But looking to find compassion on people that have a need, right? So God gives us what he gives us, and we are to be good stewards of it, whether that's our finances, our time, whatever it is that God has given to us, we're to be good stewards. And part of that stewarding is when there is need. You think of in the old, or not in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, when the church had need, what were people doing? They were coming together to seek to meet those needs because they cared for one another, right? And so they were giving selflessly of what they had to help someone else. And so this idea of this woman, as we're speaking of her, but again, not just to pinpoint only the woman, as you said, this is something that we as men can reflect on too, right?
Mhm.
When we say Proverbs 31, this is characteristics that we should strive to do as well, to be generous, to be merciful, to be compassionate on someone who has a need. So while we live in a time where there are many people, and we see this, there are stories in the newspapers and on news channels of people who are standing in certain places seeking money, and you find out that they actually are well off, but they're just going out there looking to get money. Well, we don't always know those things, but to be compassionate upon somebody, if they're saying, "Hey, I'm hungry," buy them a sandwich, get them some food. You know what I mean? Offer them, if you have the means to provide a job, offer them, hey, I got a position, I can put you to work. You know, um, if there's a need for clothing, like it says in the scripture, if somebody comes and they're asking you for something, don't just turn them away and say, "Go be warmed." No,
Mhm.
give them what they need, right? To be compassionate in that. And so this is this idea, as we talk about this virtuous woman, this portrait of godly strength, as the show's titled, um, that we're seeing here in Proverbs 31. So, an excellent wife, who can find it? If you're a Christian man, you should be seeking, a single man seeking to find a woman who is displaying this godly character, who's going to not only be profitable to your family in the physical aspects of things, but also spiritually
Mhm.
in the home and in the life.
Amen.
Well, I mean, that's any other words, Mike? We'll wrap it up. Kind of got done just a little bit earlier, not going over the hour mark, but
Yeah. No, I think we can trivialize this a little bit. But I think if we take the time to study it like we've done here, we can see and think about what this means and how, and in some sense, even for us married men, I know this is kind of I mean, Proverbs in general is geared towards Solomon and his son and wisdom to grow. But I think as men and as married men, as we are, we can, I think, use Proverbs 31 to pray for our wives, that God will grow them in this way that we can, um, enjoy the fruits of this. And that I think at the same time for us to pray that we, love our wives like Christ loves the church, and to have that and to think about even ways as a husband, how can I help my wife to this end and to allow her to flourish in what God has made her to do, and to be, um, as Peter say, um, loving my wife as a weaker vessel, so that my prayers aren't hindered. There is a very real consequences in that way, and just to think about how as husbands we can enable our wives to better reflect what it is to be a Proverbs 31 woman, and to grow in that, because with daughters and with sons, our marriage is the example in which we want to set for them, so that they have a successful marriage and that they know what to look for. So in one sense, this is not just for single men as afar, but an admiration for me and my wife to live in such a way that exemplifies what it means to have a godly marriage, so that my children know what it means to have a godly marriage and be able to find and be picky about who they choose to get married for the duration of their time on earth.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. All right. Well, that's been G220 Radio for tonight. Next week we will be, next week we'll be back, but it'll be Mike with the catechism question.
Mhm.
And then following that, we'll be back in Proverbs 31, Lord willing, the week after. Until next time, that's been G220 Radio. God bless.
And stay Baptist.